Okay, today we start a new chapter in Tanya, a new section in Tanya. Right, that's it. Next 9 chapters is one section, or the section itself is divided into different sections. So let's just give a bit of background and context to what's going to happen now. So until now, we mentioned this last week, Al-Rebbe based the Tanya on the pasuk that both in deed, speech, and heart, Kikorav Elecha, it's accessible to you, it's easy to you, one can master it, and so on. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu told the Jewish people. And the question that Tanya is based on is, how can that be? What do you mean, especially when it comes to love and being, in general, being in control of thought, speech, and action? All these things is difficult. So how's it Kikorav? How's it close to you, right? And really, if you simplify it, not simplify it, but if you categorize it simply, until now, the Alter Rebbe gave 2 strategies. Okay. First 17 chapters of Tanya really deal with one strategy called Mach Shalit al Alev, that the head rules the heart. So therefore, if one is misboinen, if you reflect and think and learn and understand the nature of the struggle between the 2 souls and so on and so forth, and you understand the nefesh alakis is dominant, is guided by the brain, in other words, guided by thinking about Hashem. And by doing that, you can come to control what the heart feels, and through that you can control what you do and the behavior and what you say and what you speak. Basically, we're in control, right? Now, in that itself, there were sort of 2 strategies. That's in the first strategy, there's kind of 2 strategies. One is that real hisbonenus, real reflection comes with full-blown love, and if that doesn't work, then this concept called the love in the love in the brain, in other words, intellectual love, right? If you can't get to the madrega of doing it in the heart. That's part 1, strategy 1. Before we get to strategy 2, I'll just make a comment about something that I was leaving a share to a few guys last night, and this came up. I mean, you've heard me talk about this before. When we say that the first strategy is the brain rules the heart, right? It's important to understand what that means also. Meaning, Tanya, as I've said many, many times, Tanya is not a therapy book. It's not a psychology book, right? There are certain forms of psychology and therapy and modalities and things like that which are certainly in line with Tanya. It doesn't mean that they Tanya. It doesn't mean that they Torah either, right? This is a big topic, but just to mention it in this context, because I give this as an example. So I remember reading an article by Rabbi Sachs that in the country he was trying to say that things are rooted in Torah, which is true, of course. And he talked about the movement of positive psychology, post-Freud, in other words, Viktor Frankl, Seligman, all these people that talked about it. And essentially, their theory is about the brain rules the heart, right? The pause, they talk about the pause. You have stimulus and reaction, and between that there's a pause. And essentially, there's also 7 habits based on the same theory. Basically, we have responsibility, we have freedom, we can choose. And the way it works is emotions go very quickly. So whenever something happens to us, our emotions right away want to react. We have to pause, think about what's right, what's wrong, and then make a decision, and we choose right, even when it's hard for us, so the brain actually rules the heart. So Rabbi Sachs was saying that this is actually an old Jewish concept, and he mentions particularly the Tanya. He says in Tanya, this predates Viktor Frankl, predates Seligman, predates all these things, and the whole thing is based on Moyach Shalit al Alev, the brain rules the heart. And having said that, however, it's important to understand, and this is a big mistake people are making today. The concept is rooted in Tanya, but what Moyach Shalit al Alev means in Tanya is something totally different. What I mean. The concept is the same, but the idea is totally different. Because Tanya is a book of Avodas Hashem. It's not a book of healthy living. It's not a book of healthy emotions. It's not a book of emotional regulation. It's a book of how to serve Hashem. Now, if you serve Hashem the way Tanya wants you to serve Hashem, you obviously will achieve those things too, of course. But that's not what it's about. So you can have a person, because Tanya it's not a human seichel, it's not a human intellect, it's not a human subject, it's part of Torah, particularly the esoteric part of Torah. And the way the Rebbe explains it, particularly the whole introduction of Hasidus Chabad in particular, was a big chidush. It was a big thing. It was taking something which actually transcends the human mind and bringing it in so the human mind can understand it. But essentially, at its core, it's something which transcends seichel. It's based on emunah, it's based on Yiddishkeit, it's based on neshama. So to give you an example, right? You can have a person who's not even Jewish, let's say, right? And he reads some self-help books, and he reads the right ones, the good ones that are at least in line with Torah. And he reads Viktor Frankl or whatever, 7 Habits, all these things. And he makes good decisions. He wants to live in a healthy way. He wants to live in a meaningful way. And he has control. He has control. Mind over heart. Right? Someone insults him. He wants to get angry. He says, no, it's not worth it. It ruins the relationship. It's not going to be healthy for me. It's not going to be healthy for the other person. I'm not going to achieve anything. So he decides not to do it. So that's a human instinct that the person could do. And more, you don't have to be Jewish to do that. You can be non-Jewish. You don't have to look Chassidus for that. Yes, the concepts are rooted in Tanya, but they you don't have to know anything about Tanya. You can come to the same conclusion. Why am I so passionate about this? Because what people are doing today sometimes is that they go the other way around. They start with these modalities and then they put them into the Tanya. Tanya's not talking about that. So a person who makes the right decision because he wants to live in a healthy way, he wants to be a healthy human being, it's got nothing to do with Tanya. Tanya is about avodas Hashem. In other words, Tanya is not just that you use your brain to rule the heart, which is a nature the person needs. What Tanya means, it's very explicit. He says what that means is that therefore you can take your nefesh halakis, right, which is the dominant thing in nefesh halakis is the brain, and the nefesh halakis can control the nefesh habamis, which primarily is instinct and emotion, right? That's a very different idea. The regular mind over heart you can do even if you don't have a nefesh halakis, because it's an instinctive thing. That a human being is different to an animal, any human being. And if a human being can have self-control, that doesn't mean they're going to reach at a level where they want to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can be a complete atheist, actually, right? And do the same thing. It's a very nice thing. At least they're living nice lives and healthy lives, and they're being nice to other people. It's a very good thing, but it's got nothing to do with avodas Hashem. It's a good way of living, and it's a nice thing. At least they're not self-absorbed and narcissistic like the modern day psychology, right? So that's good. It's a good step. And certainly someone who lives that way, if he starts learning Chassidus, is going to be easier to relate to. But that's not Chassidus. Chassidus is about the choices that you make and the mind ruling the heart to come to serve, do every mitzvah, and not to do navera, to be in control of your thought, speech, and action. You understand what I'm saying? It's a very, very important point, because people band around this idea of Moch Shalit Alalev, and I've heard podcasts about this. They talk about Tanya, and they talk about, you make these decisions of healthy living and all that. That's really Moch Shalit Alalev, what Tanya's talking about. That's not true. It's got nothing to do with what Tanya's talking about. And it's not nothing to do. It's the same perspective, but it's not what Tanya is redressing. Okay, just an interesting side point. Okay, that's strategy 1. Strategy 2, the Alter Rebbe says, and this is from chapter 18 all the way to 25 that we finished last week, is not through Moach Shalit Alev, but it's being in touch with your hidden love, your intrinsic love. Right? And then he went through the whole thing that hidden love also brings to Mesiras Nefesh, and then you have to understand that really every mitzvah naver is like that, and through that you come to be in touch with it, and therefore you only want to be connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore you want to stay away. You want to engage in anything that's going to bring you closer to Hashem, and you want to disengage from anything that will keep you away from Hashem. Right? That's essentially, in one sentence, all the chapters we learned from 18 to 25. Those are the 2 strategies that answers the question. And in fact, the last parak, he starts off with chapter 25. He says, this is what it means, that this is close to you and accessible to you. And essentially, after chapter 25, he's answered the question. However, yeah, all good? However, what the Rebbe wants to address now is this. For the next 9 chapters he wants to address, that's all very good, and that works. But there are other things that stand in the way of achieving this. Right? There are other things that stand in the way. And he's going to explain in a minute. And the Alter Rebbe addresses in the next 9 chapters what those things are and how we can address them. So it's not an answer to the question of how it's accessible. The main answer is done already. In other words, you have to either Moch Shalit Alev, through intellectual love, through real love, or tapping into your hidden love. Obviously, you need both. And that's how you come to the perspective of you have to engage with mitzvahs and you have to be in control of your thought, speech, and action to be a Benini, or at least to be an aspiring Benini. Right? But there will be obstacles in the way to achieve this, and those obstacles need to be dealt with. So the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about things like sadness. He's going to talk a lot about simcha. He's going to talk about different types of sadness and worry and anxiety that comes from either physical matters or spiritual matters. And he's going to address each one separately. He's going to talk about when people are spiritually numb and what he calls timtum halev, the blockness of the heart. He will address some of it is really, it's all inspiring, but some of it is more complicated than others. Like some of it is actually demanding, because what we'll learn a bit later is the Alter Rebbe will actually say that part of the time you also have to unblock the blockage, and that sometimes comes from really breaking down the nefesh habamis, breaking down the animal soul a bit, and actually chopping it up and confronting it and screaming at it almost, right? And being uncomfortable with the nefesh habamis at the same time, knowing how to use it. And he will explain later on in the various chapters of how those two things are not a contradiction. You can be besimcha, you can be very happy, and at the same time give a good punch to your nefesh habamis at the same time. It's not a contradiction. He'll explain it all. Okay, so that's the next 9 chapters. Within that nine chapters, by the way, we have a famous chapter which we'll get to in Mr. Shem called chapter 32, Perek Leiv in Tanya, 32. And that's the famous chapter about how you achieve Ve'ahavta Re'acha Kamocha. It almost sounds like a bit of a tangent. It's not a tangent, we'll see later. It's actually quite foundational. And that's also got to do with giving the dominance to the neshama over the body and so on. Okay. Let's do it. Perek Chavav. Says the Alter Rebbe. Brom, however, he says, we need to highlight and to inform a very, very important rule. And that is the following. Right? Just like to win a fight, and 2 people wrestle, right? To be victorious in a physical sense when there's a fight. For example, 2 people are wrestling with each other, and they want to try and knock the other one to the floor, for example, right? We know a fact that if the one of them has a laziness to him, or a heaviness to him, sadness, a heaviness, he will be defeated very easily and he will fall. Even if he's stronger than his friend. To win, you have to have determination. To win, you have to be confident. To win, you have to be zrizus. You have to work with alacrity, right? Kacha mamash, he says the same thing is true, but nitzachan hayetzer, with the inner spiritual war that we have between the 2 souls, or the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, and so on and so forth. Yeah. It says it's impossible to win over the nefesh habamis be'atzlus ukvedus, with a sense of laziness or a sense of heaviness. Yeah? Where does laziness and heaviness come from? Comes from hanim shoches, they come me'atzlus, from sadness, lack of joy, the timtum halev ka'oven, or the blockness of the heart, the numbness of the heart, the blockages of the heart, when the heart is like stone and you're just not feeling. They're 2 separate things. Later we'll address more the second one, the timtum halev. They're a bit related, but they're 2 separate things. So the sense of being drawn down, the sense of being lazy, people who are very happy are not lazy. It's interesting, the relationship between laziness and happiness, right? You see, like when someone is very, very upbeat and wants to achieve something, they're much more likely to achieve it and go and get it done than if they're not happy. Right? It's like sadness, almost like a kind of a depression, as he explained. Like, I mean, he's not talking about clinical depression, because Tanya wasn't written for people who have clinical pathologies. That's you need a therapist for that. I mean, Tanya helps also, but that's not what he's addressing. He's addressing a normal nefesh habamis, right? And nefesh habamis is self-absorbed. Nefesh habamis actually doesn't. You don't really find true happiness only for the nefesh habamis. as we've been talking about on Thursday a lot, you find it from something higher. You find it from tapping in really to our godly spark, our godly side, right? So, atzvus, if a person is not happy and drawn down, that breeds to laziness, heaviness, and the resistance to achieving, right? Ki'im bezrizus. The opposite of that is zrizus, alacrity. When you get out, you do it, you're onto it. That's it. Where does zrizus come from? Hanim sheches misimcha. It comes from joy. Upsichas halev, and the opening of the heart. The taharasai, and its purity. It's taharasai means it's cleansed. It's being cleansed. Cleansed from what? Mikol nidnud, from any trace, daiga of worry, the eitzev ba'olam, or any sadness in the entire world. Interesting. You can't really have happiness or joy if you've got worry or sadness. And if you have worry and sadness, that will lead to heaviness and laziness, and you won't be able to win over your nefesh hababis, right? This, by the way, in the Rebbe's talks was a huge theme. Huge theme. Now again, like everything in Tanya, like everything in Yiddishkeit, we need to know what's our goal. What do we need, right? Like he says over here, you got to cleanse yourself from every trace of worry and sadness in your world. I haven't met a person like that just yet. But that's the goal. That's the aspiration. Right? Remember, we're always talking about, it's also linked with bitochen and everything, right? And that's, in fact, that's real bitochen. The Friedrich Rebbe writes, there's a letter of the Friedrich Rebbe, which it's interesting, you come across things when you need them. It was a while ago, I was going through a very tough time about something. I came across this letter, not because I was looking for it, because I was learning a talk with the Rebbe about something else completely on the Parsha, and he happened to clink in, and in a footnote he quotes this letter. And me, wow. So Friedrich Rebbe writes, very interesting about Simcha and Bitochen. He says, first of all, what's Bitochen? Now, this is the goal, right? To come to that, even to come to thinking about this, you have to learn a lot of Bitochen stuff, right? But he defines Bitochen. He says, when a person is drowning, and it could be figuratively speaking, he's drowning in his worries, whatever, right? He's drowning. But he has a straw to hold on to, which means there's a remote possibility he could, be saved, right? Says that's not the real expression of Bitochen. Because at the end of the day, you could be saved because of the straw. Right? Real Bitochen is when you don't have a straw either. That's Bitochen. When you don't see a straw, you don't even see a straw to hang on to, but you believe it's going to be 100% okay because Hashem is going to do it, right? Then he continues and he says, and if the straw's not there, and you have Bitochen but you're not Besimcha, that's also not Bitochen. Real Bitochen means, don't worry, if you're feeling like overwhelmed with this concept, you're in good company. I thought that's wow. But also know that when you learn something like that in Chassidus, it doesn't mean you have to become like that tomorrow morning. It means that's the approach. You have to start working, right? Real Bitochen is when there's no straw, and you have Bitochen and you Besimcha. That's kind of what Alter Rebbe is saying here, that you have to cleanse your heart. You have to be Besimcha, which means cleanse your heart from any trace of worry and sadness. Okay, now, you asked a question. It's a question which you can address briefly now and then address it a bit later again. We've actually quoted it in different shurim. You asked the question, he says, in Mishlei, in Proverbs, Shlomo HaMelech says that just one second. Yeah. It says in Mishlei. Sorry. It says in Mishlei, with all eitzev, there will be profit. There will be gains. You will gain from all eitzev. Now, what's the word eitzev mean? So the simple pshat, according to some Mefarshim, eitzev comes from the word atzvus, which is sadness, right? But actually, according to many Mepharshim, it doesn't mean sadness. In Mishle, it means actually work. In other words, every effort will bring. I haven't looked up the Digduk. Grammar is not my thing, but apparently that's one of the translations. But there are other commentaries that say no, it means sadness. When you're sad, right? Which seems to suggest that temporarily, at least, when you're not happy, it's also a good thing, and you'll have gains from it, right? How does it fit in with what we just said? In other words, like this: feeling sadness doesn't necessarily mean sadness, depression. It also mean feeling upset about something. It could be feeling uncomfortable about something, right? All those things. And Shlomo Melech seems to say that it's a good thing, and you'll have gains from it. So how does it fit in with what Tanya just said, that there shouldn't be any trace of anything, right? He says the following: Yine Adarabba, which is in the contrary. First of all, Meloshin ze mashma, from the expression, even if you translate Eitzev as sadness, it seems Shlomo Melech saying, he's not saying that the sadness itself is a good thing. He says there will be gains from the sadness. The gains is the main thing, not the sadness, right? You will achieve some advantage, some gain that will come out, will emerge from the sadness. What is that? What is that gain? You will actually achieve from the correct type of sadness, which we'll talk about in a second. You will achieve true joy with Hashem, true joy in your connection to Hashem. How will you achieve that? I'm just going to read this line, and then I'll break it down. Which will come after true sadness, the itim mezumonim at particular times, alavoinoisev on his sins, b'mar nafshoy v'leiv nishbar, feeling bitter and having a broken heart. So he addresses this later again, but let me just say what he says here. He says, first of all, any form of discomfort or sadness is not the goal. Shlomo Melech says you'll have gains from the sadness, not the sadness itself is the gain. Number one. Number two, he says we're talking about Eitzev Amiti, true sadness. What is true sadness? Not what a person just, what we say in Afrikaans, omgekrap. Yeah, not when a person is just sad and upset and down. That has no place. True sadness means, as he explains here, true sadness means sadness that a person has because he did something wrong, he transgressed. Now, he'll explain later why that's a different type of sadness, but a person should be upset from doing an Aveira. That's true. We have that in Yiddishkeit. You should do a cheshbon hanefesh, and you should feel sad. You should feel uncomfortable. Why is that so important? On a very simple level, if you don't feel uncomfortable, you never grow. Right? If a person's happy-go-lucky, he's always got joy and everything's fine, that's no good. Okay. He says, regular sadness has no place. Eitzev that Shlomo Melech is talking about is Eitzev Amiti, it's true sadness. True sadness means sadness from transgression, from doing the wrong thing, from not growing enough, from being at a place where you know you can be better. And even that has to be at certain designated times. There are designated times to be upset for doing the wrong thing. When a person committed an Aveira, or he has multiple Aveiras, whatever the case is, and he wants to do tshuva, and he wants to reconnect to Hashem, there are designated times to do that. In those times, he should take it seriously, and he should feel very uncomfortable, and he should cry and have a broken heart, and it's still not the goal. It's good, but it's not the goal. The goal is what comes after that. And he explains, he says a beautiful thing. He says, Shal Yedei, right? Shal Yedei Zeh, because through being uncomfortable about the things you did, Nishbara Ruach HaTumah, you have an amazing thing just happened. Through feeling upset and breaking your heart, so to speak, because you did something wrong against Hashem, you will break the spirit of impurity, you will break the Sitra Achra, and you will break you will break that wall that you created between you and Hashem. Right? What's the result of that? Tremendous simcha. When you've broken that wall, you reconnected to Hashem, tremendous simcha. There's no way to break that wall unless you're upset first. Designated times, only upset is because of those things. And the gain that Shlomo Melech is talking about only comes afterwards. And he quotes a Zohar. Right? Zohar says something very beautiful. And let me just give you a bit of background here. There's a chapter of Tehillim, Perek Nun Aleph, chapter 51. It's the chapter of Tshuva. This is a very important chapter in Tshuva. You check it out. David HaMelech is very broken there. And it's got to do with I call it so-called, because in our world it's so-called Aveira that David HaMelech did with Bathsheba. It's not Aveira the way it seems like it says. As we know, that's a separate shir. David HaMelech he didn't commit adultery or anything like that. It's not anything close to that. But on his level, it was a deficiency and it was considered an Aveira. Right? And he did tshuva. One of the greatnesses of David HaMelech is he right away admitted that he done something wrong. And he did an amazing tshuva. And the tshuva is expressed in chapter 51 of Tehillim. Mentions at the top there, Bathsheba. Mentions there. And over there, on one pasuk it says, the Zohar brings this. Al pasuk, on the pasuk that it says, Ruach Nishbara, a spirit of brokenness, Leiv Nishbar, a broken heart, and it says that's the korban, that's a type of sacrifice that Hashem will never reject. Today we can bring a sin offering if we do an Aveira, right? But we can have a broken heart, and it's even better than a korban. Right? We can have a feeling of really brokenness because we can create a division between us and Hashem. But if you look at the first part of the chapter, what does it say? Rebbe says, when you do that, that's not the goal. The goal is to achieve what it says, Reisha Dikra, what it says at the beginning of the chapter, which is, David HaMelech says, Tashmi Eini Sosain V'Simcha. Let me hear joy and gladness. Right? Hashivali, return to me, says David HaMelech. Sesoin Yishecha, the joy of your salvation. V'ruach Nediva, and the spirit of your generosity. That's the goal, right? The question is, how do you reach that goal? Sometimes you do need to go through a period of Eitzev Amiti, true sadness. Sadness of being distant from Hashem, sadness of yearning to reconnect with Hashem, and having a broken heart while you went against Hashem, right? That's an important thing to do. It's an important stepping stone at designated times. But it's all to achieve the reconnection with Hashem in order to achieve the real simcha. So therefore the Alter Rebbe stands by what he said at the beginning of the Perek, that the only way ultimately to overcome the Yetzer Hara is simcha, and to get rid of sadness. Like the person wrestling with his friend, that's the only way to overpower your friend, right? Yeah. Who does that? Yeah, no. I mean, half of all our davening is based on Tillim almost, right?
It's just, but everything you try and understand.
It takes back Tillim, of course, a lot of it, yeah, especially the way we serve Hashem. I mean, Tillim is a model. That's why we are so attached to Tillim. Yeah? Then you visit Israel and you walk in Yud David and you walk in the place Tillim was made. It's like incredible. He says, V'zeh Tama Poshet, he says, this is the simple reason. The Tikkun Arizal, why the Arizal instituted the following. Let me just give you the background here. There's something we don't do, most people don't do it today, something called Tikkun Chatzois. Tikkun Chatzois is reserved for very special people. It's time of tshuva. It's basically when you get up in the middle of the night and you cry for the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash and the golus that Hashem is in and still in because of the things that we do wrong. Yeah, so to get up and make a show out of it, but you don't really feel it, that's not, you better sleep, it's better to sleep and get up early. But there were something, people used to get up, and in times where Rizal was very common, people would do this. There's still some that do it today, on the Koisel list, still some that are there every night at 12 o'clock doing it, and so on. But Rizal said that when you finish Tikkun Chatzos is very, I don't want to use the word depressing, but it's very, very tshuva focused, right? Very, very sharp, very heavy. And the Arizal said that after Tikkun Chatzos is finished, when you finish, you should say the Tillim 51. Right? Now, by the way, just interesting, I don't know if in all Siddurim, but in our Siddur, the Chabad Siddur, the Bread Time Shema also has that chapter of Tillim. And maybe it's the same idea, because what he says here, what the Arizal did was, the reason why I said you should say it afterwards is because Tikkun Chatzos is certainly one of those times that's the designated times for the sadness that the Alter Rebbe is talking about here. But it's important to understand that afterwards you have to get back to Simcha. It's got to bring to Simcha, right? So could be that's why we say in Krishma Shalamita also, because somewhere it says that today we can't do tshuva tikkun chatzos because tikkun chatzos is you have to be on a high level. But what we do is instead we do it. We try to do it at least by the bet tam shema. Bet tam shema is a time of tshuva. Also, it's one of those designated times. If you want to feel bad about something you've done, Krishna Shalamit is the right time to do it, right? So Arizal said you should say it after Achar Tikkun Chatzos Kodim Alim, but after Tikkun Chatzos, before you sit down to learn Torah. The time of the Arizal wasn't you got up for Tikkun Chatzos and you went back to sleep. You got up for Tikkun Chatzos and then you stayed up to learn Torah. Apparently the Torah you learn after midnight is a very special Torah. Okay. So why? He says because Kadei Lilmoid B'Simcha Mitis B'Hashem. It's in order to learn with true simcha. Habo achar eitzav, the simcha that comes after sadness. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech meant. Why? Because yesh simcha zu yisra. That simcha that comes after sadness is so great. It's a greater simcha. It's a simcha that it's a light that comes after darkness. You know, the light comes after darkness. This is what he says is a greater light than the light that came before. That light was just there, right? Moshe Kosovo Zohar says in the Zohar, the pasuk of Koheles, Shlomo HaMelech says, I saw that there's an advantage to the wisdom over foolishness and like the light over darkness. And we know the Chassidus interprets it a bit differently. The simple pshat in Koheles is that Shlomo HaMelech says, I saw there's a great advantage of wisdom over foolishness, or light over darkness. That means, in other words, the one's better than the other. Chassidus says, no, if you look in the word, it says the word min. Min means from. Shlomo HaMelech means, I saw a great advantage in the wisdom that comes from foolishness, or the light that comes from darkness, the transformation of darkness. Therefore, the main thing is simcha. Shlomo HaMelech says there's an advantage in sadness. That means, yes, to reach a proper simcha, a greater simcha, sometimes it's a greater simcha that comes from the discomfort of that sadness that you have at designated time for the proper reason. But the ultimate is still simcha. Now, and also he says, one more thing in this part. He says, "Umikre mole dibura kosev," and we know that it's actually an explicit pasuk. Even though the pasuk can be interpreted differently, but we'll soon see the pasuk is in Dvarim. Dvarim, there's a part called the Toicha where Hashem reprimands the Jewish people about all the terrible things that can happen to us if we don't listen to Hashem and so on. And at the very end of that reprimand, it says, this is all going to happen because you didn't serve Hashem b'simcha b'tuv levov, when you had joy and happiness and good things. The simple pshat is that Hashem is saying, you had good stuff before I gave you all these punishments and stuff. You didn't take advantage. You didn't serve Hashem then, right? You didn't do the mitzvahs, and therefore now you have to suffer. That's the simple pshat. The Rizal said, no, pshat's different. And the Rambam's also a little bit seems that way. Rizal says, that's what you didn't know. Hashem is saying, you know why you're getting all these things? Because you didn't serve Hashem. You served Hashem, but you didn't serve Hashem with simcha. That not even serve Hashem in a time of simcha. You served Hashem, but you didn't serve Hashem with joy. Right? That's how critical idea of simcha is. And therefore, that's a harsh thing. In other words, you didn't serve Hashem with simcha, and therefore you deserve, even though you did the mitzvahs and all that, you didn't really serve Hashem properly. Because you weren't serving Hashem with joy. And that's again the pasuk is bringing to show us how critical the idea of simcha is. Now, so a person can have sadness or anxiety or guilt or torment or whatever the case is from two reasons, two causes. There's two roots, as it calls here. Either mila de alma, from material things, which can either be inconsequential or even consequential. In other words, it can be from health, it can be from anything, right? A person can from physical things, right? Or a person can have sadness from spiritual things. Feels guilty, feels down, he's being suffered. Which, by the way, is the worst Yetzer Hara that we know. Right? The worst Yetzer Hara is not to have sadness only at designated times. The biggest tactic of the Yetzer Hara, as we know, is to make a person feel guilty, bad guilt. Right? It says somewhere that the Yetzer Hara is very clever. So sometimes a Yetzer Hara knows he can't get a person to commit a very big avera. Person's a from guy, right? He's keeping mitzvahs, keep shot, whatever. So what's he going to do? He's going to again to commit adultery, to kill someone, right? That's what it works. What does he do? He gets into a small affair, and then he makes you feel very guilty about it. And once a person is down and guilty and worried and upset, it just goes worse. It goes from bad to worse. That's how it works. Okay. So now Alter wants to address both sources of unhappiness, and what we're going to do today a little bit, or we'll start today at least, is addressing the sadness that comes from what we call mila de alma, things from worldly things, right? That's okay. Worldly things. Now, it's a very complex piece, right? We're about to learn here is a very complex piece, and easier said than done, obviously. But a perspective that we have to be, and really, it's a bit of the basis of Shara B'Tochen also. And I'll going to say it like it is. I'm just giving you a soldier's warning. It's not an easy thing. This. Why is it not an easy thing? Because there's a very complex approach that we have in Yiddishkeit, and we should have, right? On the one hand, we know our job is to ask Hashem for what we call revealed good. That's what we daven for. That's what we ask Hashem to give us continuously. That's our job. You know, there's a very interesting piece in Ne'ilah. One of the things we say in Ne'ilah, right? One of the things we scream out in the repetition of the Shemona Esrei in Ne'ilah, we say, Sharei Shomayim Psach. Say to Hashem, gates of heaven, open up. V'yitzorcha hatoiv lanu tiftach. And your great treasure house up there, lanu tiftach, open up for us. That's what we say. And there's two ways to understand the sentence depending on where you put the comma. So it could read, V'yitzorcha hatoiv, your good treasure, lanu tiftach, open up for us. That's one way to read. So you can put there's four words there. From your good treasure, lanu to us, tiftach, open. You put the comma after toiv, after your good treasure, lanu tiftach, open up for us. But Tzemach Tzedek said, no, it's not the way it should be read. And next time you hear me say Ne'ilah, you'll see I'm very careful to read it like that. I stop. Alter Rebbe says, you should say, the Tzemach Tzedek the comma should be later. It should be like this. Sharei Shomayim Psach, gates of heaven open up. V'yitzorcha hatoiv lanu. And your treasure house that is good for us. I mean, it's good that we can see that it's good. Not that you come in and tell us that it's really good. But hatoiv hatoiv lanu, your toiv lanu should be good for that we can see that it's good, that we can relate to it as something good. Tiftach, you should open, right? Similar idea we find that when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we wish everyone Shana Tova Mesukah, a good and sweet year. The question is, what do you mean? Why do you have to be sweet? A good year means sweet year. No, it's not so simple. Because there's different kinds of good, as we're about to learn, right? You wish you a good year, but a good year that you should feel. You should feel the sweetness, right? Because there's different levels of good. There's a very famous idea, the stories of tzaddikim, and said that for some tzaddikim, they said before they went away from this world, they said they're going to daven for people who are in pain, whatever, right? And then at the end, they I don't know how people know this. I mean, tzaddikim know what's going on in the Shemayim and everything, but then they weren't able to do it. Why? Because they reached upstairs and they were in Gan Eden and they saw things very differently. They saw a whole different world. And they didn't relate to the badness anymore because they were seeing something different. Because the view from upstairs is very different than the view from here. Nevertheless, we are taught, this is part of davening, we daven every day for Hashem, Refa'einu, heal us, give us parnasa, right? We look for brachas that we perceive to be good, known as Toiv, Hanirav, Hanirav. Having said that doesn't mean that the truth is that the other stuff isn't good. And that's such a hard thing to straddle, those two things, right? In a way, it would be easier if we just said, everything is good. If we just have to learn how to accept everything. It's not that way. Because we actually have to ask for proper good. We have to ask for good that we can perceive. And yet, we also have to have the perspective that everything Hashem gives is good. Not only, as we're going to learn, I'm giving you an introduction to the background here. Not only everything Hashem is good, but actually sometimes the stuff that to us doesn't look good is actually a greater good. It's a deeper good.
When you know it's a sign that
Sorry? What's the question?
When do you know that it's a sign that you should repent?
I don't know. I don't like to go into punishments. I don't know how that works. But every time something happens to us, we should always try and do more. That's a. We always have to repent.
I'm not talking about so much at an individual level as a national level.
So the Rambam says nothing happens. There's a general rule, good or not good. Nothing happens by chance. Everything that happens, we have to respond to. Okay, so if something happens to us that is to our eyes not good, obviously we need to try harder. Say, do more. Whether it's a response because you have to make a bigger vessel, or it's a response because of punishment, I don't know. I don't know these things, and I don't like to think Hashem's. That's for individual.
So should spur on to tshuva? Like
Everything should be spur to the tshuva. A person should be, it says, kol yoma b'tshuva, should be all our days in tshuva. Tshuva doesn't always mean that we're doing bad. Tshuva means that we're connecting deeper to Hashem, which results in more mitzvahs, more Torah. Yeah, look, it does say in Rambam, of course, if there's a gzeira, sometimes there's a decree on a community, there's a drought, there's this, that, of course you should proclaim a fast and do tshuva. I think it's a separate topic. I don't think it's got to do with this. Yeah, that's a basic response when everything, because we don't know why Hashem does things. And
no, but to perceive it, if you're perceiving it as good for your ultimate good.
they're not, that's what I'm saying, we're full of contradictions.
So I'll say this last.
Yeah, so again, that's a hard thing. That's what I'm saying. I'm going slowly, and maybe we'll do it a little bit this week and do more next week. It's very difficult. The Rabbi even someplace says that the only way we can actually achieve this is because a yid can combine opposites. Because these are conflicting ideas. That's what I'm trying to say.
But did you say if you accept everything, you will feel this with acceptance? That's not it. You have to perceive it.
We have to daven for we perceive as good. We daven in Shemona Esrei, please heal us. It's one of the brachos. We mean that the person should get better. That's what we mean. We don't mean that some hidden good somewhere. We mean the person should actually get better, or I should get better, whatever. We mean, Hashem, please, this person is suffering an illness, make him better. That's what we mean. Right? So what does that mean? We're davening for toiv lanu. We're davening for good that we perceive as good. What we call revealed good. Yeah? Which seems to imply, I'll get to your tshuva, I think I know what you mean. I'll get to the tshuva in a second, right? Which seems to imply that when Hashem hasn't made the person better yet, right? Or he hasn't made me earn enough money yet, that it's not good. The answer is no, that's not true. Because there's a rule, and nothing from Hashem comes that is bad. Nothing bad comes from Hashem. Hashem is all good. Right? And not only that, we're about to learn, not only is all good, but sometimes good cloaked in what we perceive to be as bad is even a better good. At the same time, we're going to daven that it goes away. Right? Now, the tshuva part is because we don't know why it's good. It could be very good for us. It could be it's very good for us because it's cleansing us from something that we're doing bad. I don't know. I don't know why it's good. And part of that is we have to become better and do tshuva. All part of it. But this is not the topic now, why it's good. That's not the point. It could be good because to make us stronger. It could be a test. It could be anything. Why is it good? I don't know. But it's good.
So the hostages.
We have to scream and daven that Hashem should come home. We also have to believe that nothing bad comes from Hashem. It's a difficult thing. Correct? Why is that different to if we're going through a thing ourselves? Same concept. Just Hashem that seems more stark, so it's hard to come to terms with it. Right?
I think also because it's harder when you see what's happening to somebody else.
Of course. And by the way, that's no, so I want to bring something else. I want to revert that everything that's in the opposite of Kedusha is also in the opposite of everything that's in impurity is also impurity. That's what we everything is. Someone asked Baal Shem Tov a question. I think it was Baal Shem Tov, but whatever. So heresy is a very bad thing, right? Where do you find heresy in Kedusha? What's a holy form of heresy? I mean, it can be. It's a what do you mean? You have to believe in Hashem, right? So you say when it comes to someone else, right? You see someone else suffering, don't start saying, it's really good. Hashem, you say, Hashem, this is not good. You got to make it better. Okay, okay. Over here, the Alter is not talking about that. Now, at the same time, you can't say things that are really heretical. In other words, the hurt will do that. How can Hashem do that? You can't ask questions of Hashem, but you can still say to Hashem, I don't accept it. I need that person to become better. Right? To me, it's bad. I don't want this. Okay. But here, Al Rebbe is talking about to the person going through something. Right? What our own perspective has to be. Understand? The Mendel Futterfass was you always have me recording, right? He was in prison in Siberia in the harshest conditions for I don't know how many years, and he was always happy. Because he internalized this, right? Okay. So that's the thing. Now we'll explain why it's even greater good and all that kind of stuff. But it's complex. I'm saying it's complex. And they have to go together. And they have to go together with simcha, because what happens is I have to, in other words, what the perspective the Alter Rebbe is going to give us now when we're going through a challenge, a physical challenge, that is, right? A material challenge. Well, it's not a mitzvah challenge, a material challenge. The perspective is going to give to understand that it's really good is that's why you shouldn't be sad. You should be besimcha, right? But that's not a contradiction. You should daven that we need revealed. That two things have to go together. So I have a cousin that actually once my father's cousin, he's much older than me. And I was once at the Kinus HaShluchim and I was sitting on a bus with him. We were going one of the trips we were doing there. And I knew that when he was young, he had a lot of conversations with the Rebbe in Yechidus, and he had correspondence with the Rebbe. He used to write to the Rebbe a lot of things, he used to get answers. So he, I asked him to share stuff with me. So one of the things he shared with me was that he once wrote to the Rebbe that if you're learning Tanya, which we're about to learn, that really comes from a very high level of good. So Taka, why do we ask for a real good? Why? So we should say, okay, this is such good, it's amazing good, so I'll just accept it, not daven. So Rebbe explains because Hashem is a Kel Yachol, Hashem is infinite and omnipresent, and he can give us the higher good in a good way, in a revealed good way. In other words, it's not a contradiction. Again, it's all these things that are complex, right? But I'm just giving the basic framework. The basic framework is we have to be b'simcha. Everything Hashem gives us is ultimately good. That's what we live in. At the same time, we have to daven Hashem, I want revealed good. Right? It could be on a very practical reason. I want revealed good because that's how I'm going to serve you better. Like it's hard for me to serve you when I'm in pain, right? Or whatever. Hashem wants us to have good. We have to believe Hashem wants us to experience. Our perspective is we have a certain type of good that we see as good, and that's what we daven to Hashem. Otherwise, the tefillah is not meaningful, right? And they have to go together. Okay. So how does it start? We'll start the concept, and we'll do it more next week. I want to go slowly in this chapter because actually every part here is very important. So he brings the thing. He says like this: the strategy to rid your heart from eitzev and nidnu daiga, from worry, past worry, and even future worry. Mimila de alma, from material things, from worldly things. Afilu bona chaya mezayna. This is very. Even if it means you're suffering a real challenge, which means you're lacking, not that you're lacking a certain comfort, but you're lacking in real important things like things to do with children, livelihood, sustenance, all these things. We have to start a foundation. The foundation is Maimar Rabbi Seinuzah, the saying of Chazal, which we've quoted many times, Kashem Shemavarach al hara, kach walach la tova. Just like you make a bracha on the good, the Gemara says you have to make a bracha on things that aren't good, right? You know what I'm talking about, yes? So there's a bracha we make for some very good things. It's called Hatoiv Hameiti. You bless Hashem and He gives you good. There's a bracha we make for very bad news, like I'm going to lose a loved one, Chas v'Shalom. You say, die on emes. You say, Hashem's a true judge. You accept His judgment, right? And the simple pshat in the Gemara is just saying that just like there's a bracha for bad, just like there's a bracha for good, there's a bracha for bad. But Rashi says no, there's a different pshat in the Gemara. The Gemara says, kashem, just like you make the bracha, the same way you make the bracha on the good, that's how you have to make the bracha on the bad. And Rashi says, the Gemara says, the Gemara says, lakabule besimcha. You have to accept it with joy. Now, note, it's not denying that there's bad. The best proof of that is it's not the same bracha. Right? It's not the same bracha. It's a different bracha because one is easy to handle and gishmak to handle, and the other one is very painful to handle. right? You can't lie. You can't say Atoiva Meiti when it's bad, revealed bad at least, right? And yet you can still be with Simcha, and you can accept them both the same with Simcha. That's what the Gemara says. That's the thing. Now how? Just like you accept the Simcha which is revealed good. And Alter Rebbe, we're going to stop here, but Alter Rebbe is going to go into a Chassidus explanation of where is the source from challenging good, and actually to understand that the challenging good comes from even a higher level than the revealed good. And we'll have to explain that next week. And that's why you think again. But at the same time, you go through. It's complex, but it's complex, but it's the truth. So that's why we have to learn it and try and internalize it, and try to reach that type of a simcha at least partially, so we can have that perspective.